Of course, he did that Venom story.
That's right. He wrote the one that I worked on. So, yeah, I ended up, that was actually my third job in comics, was working on Batman Venom. So it was crazy. A lot of great people brought me in, and a lot of great people I got to work with. So if you want to go through that part of it, like the list.
Well, it's got to be interesting that really early on. Well, you guys were talking before about backstage about your first gig being the Adventures of Fort Fairlane.
Yeah.
which nobody, is going to talk about being the hottest thing on the market.
Hey, the movie was at the peak of the Dice Man's that thing, and they were expecting the movie to be the next big thing.
Yeah. It's really not that bad a movie. I think it's pretty fun, but I might be biased. But yeah, I ended up, Joe Orlando was the vice president up at DC who was in charge of special projects. Dick Giordano had the mainline stuff, and Joe did all special projects, vice president. So he was my teacher in school. I'd met him early. He'd written my recommendation to get into college, School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, where I met Pat. And so Joe liked my work and said, when you're done, maybe we can come up and get you some work up at DC. It's a nice person to know to get that kind of work. And the first thing was Fort Fairlane. He knew I hadn't had any real storytelling experience, so we started out doing designs. The comic was a prequel to there it is, a prequel to the movie, and so I had to design the characters as if they were in the 70s and do a lot of research and film stills and stuff. So I started doing that. Then the guy who was drawing it, Jose Delbo, had a conflict and had to leave the book. So we were kind of stuck. 2 issues left to do, and 32 pages each. And Joe said, "So you want to try and pencil?" I said, "Sure." I always just said yes, whatever he asked me to do. I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So he said, "We'll get Carmine Infantino to do the layouts. You'll do the pencils over Carmine, right on the boards, and then Don Heck and Frank Springer will ink." So it's like a who's who of guys I grew up reading, And then they use my pencil drawings for the covers. So, which is kind of funny because it goes full circle now. Now I just draw with pencil on my finishes, but my first work was done just pencil for those covers. So, and some of those covers were just like sketches that they ended up putting on the cover, and it was a little embarrassing, but hey, you got to start somewhere, So,
And just to our audience, just let everybody know about Joe Orlando. He's probably the most important comic artist that you've never heard of. He really he's one of those among artists and among industry and among historians. He's well known, but he should be up there with like Kirby and Eisner, but concept-wise he isn't. And of course, at SVA he was a fantastic teacher.
Yeah. And he was the guy who, it was him and Wally Wood were like a tag team on everything for art. Like from Mad Magazine on, they both got out of the Army together. Mm-hmm. They ended up sharing an apartment. And he said one was always drawing. When one was drawing, one guy was sleeping on the cot. Then he'd wake that guy up, and then that guy would draw. So a lot of the stuff was interchangeable. I mean, there's great stories about that kind of stuff. Most people know him only from like Watchmen. Like the Watchmen pirate story.
Yeah, right. He was the artist on the Tales of the Black Freighter.
Black Freighter, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, again, he was just a brilliant teacher as far as like working one-on-one with you. I was really lucky with that. The guys I worked with, Carmine was incredible. I was worried about meeting Carmine because I'd heard such not horrible things, but just scary stuff. He's a tough old guy. He won't take any crap from any young kids that don't know what they're doing. But he was a sweetheart. I would go up to his apartment, which was like 3 blocks from DC. He wouldn't step foot on DC property. There was bad blood. So he would have me come up there. It was an old-fashioned Italian guy's apartment with the runner down the middle on the carpet. And I had the whole setup. He taught me what like tools to use. I mean, Carmine taught me about the big triangle. That's every comic artist should have this. I was like, "What's that, Carmine?" And it's like the big triangle. So, a lot of T-square. So, but yeah. So work with Carmine and totally generous with his time and his knowledge. Same with Joe. Then the biggest one for me was leaving Fort Fairlane was Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. He inked my stuff on the Batmans and taught me so much. I would go up to the offices, and sometimes we'd meet up, and he'd go over the pages with me and show me what he changed, what he was going to change. Actually had me change some stuff myself. That was like really kind of the most valuable work experience that I had. Like, it's like almost like an apprenticeship, you know?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of names are on that. I mean, I hardly dealt with Denny at all. It was me and Andy Helfer, the editor.
Yeah.
Trevor, I met early on, really nice guy. He did the rough layouts, and I worked right on the boards over his layouts. So it started out. He ended up doing a lot of work on the first one. I made it my own. I mean, I make no bones about that. I changed what I wanted to change and did what I wanted to do. And then Jose perfected it. Jose really is like the name on the book that you should look at, because that's the one. It was a great experience for me. But as far as like what you see on the page, that's mostly Jose. That's an incredible amount of detail he added and put into it.
Oh yeah, and he still got it.
Oh God, again, kind of more well known than Joe Orlando, but still an unsung legend of the field.
And an absolute just little Hispanic sweetout, you know. It was like, hello, Russ, it's okay, I changed this. Okay, I changed this.
Oh yeah,
okay, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, the guy's so good. DC decided they were going to have him make the style guides.
That's right.
You know, for their entire line.
Yeah. So because he was like their secret weapon, they kept him almost behind the scenes instead of being like having a big run on any, like the way you get known as like a fan favorite artist in comics is still to have a long run on something. So you do a year, 2 years, 3 years of a comic. That's how you get yourself out there. And he hardly got a chance to do that. It would be some special projects here and there, but he didn't have that opportunity. So I mean, I wish he was more well known for people to appreciate his work.
They really, he was, I guess, on Teen Titans, he was Perez's replacement.
Yeah.
And I think that's where he got the most notoriety was, I guess, mid 80s, mid to late 80s when Perez left when they were doing the Baxter book, because that was the best selling book DC had at the time. It was that and Legion. And Jose was, was the number 2 guy in that book. So I think that's where I really first learned who Jose was, not realizing that like all the DC licensed art that I had been seeing for years was Jose.
Yeah. And still, if you go to a dollar store and there's some kind of DC Comics stuff, almost always it's his art. Sometimes it's inked by somebody else, but sometimes it's straight up his stuff from those style guides.
All the Valentines that kids give to their classmates. Yeah. All that stuff. So yeah, you had a classic apprenticeship. That's what's really cool about this. When we've talked about this with some of the other veterans about, that's one thing that they think is missing right now is the ability to bring somebody in, give mentorship, and be right over them and say, let's try this and let's do this and let's do that. That they don't replicate at the schools necessarily.
Sure. And at the same time, everybody I worked with was great as far as allowing me to do my own thing. No one tried to make me a clone of them, At SVA, we had some great teachers. We also had some teachers that wanted to make you a clone. It's like, do this.
I heard.
Do this, do that. I mean, and I wasn't actually, at SVA, I was in illustration. I wasn't in the comics and cartooning field. So, because I said, when I got to art school, I realized I have to be like capital A, big time artist now. It's like time for fine arts and stuff. And that's when we were there. That's when like Watchmen and Dark Knight and all the stuff was coming out in like the mid to late 80s. So you realize, well, this is actually, I should just do what I always wanted to do. And that is the highest art form I could figure because I have a passion for it. So I stuck with it.
Right on.
Here I am.
So who did you look at as, when you're starting with your comics work and you're in illustration, who did you look at guys that you were like, okay, that's those are the guys doing the thing.
I'll tell you the one, and it's funny because there's none of it in my work. I wish there was to a degree, but Bill Sienkiewicz was my guy. back then. It was a Frank Miller, Bill Sienkiewicz guy, and when I would see whatever he did, he would take characters that I was familiar with. Even there were just like some covers, like he did covers for Comic Man, which was like a Marvel kind of I don't know, miniseries, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And, but he did these covers, and he's like his version of the Hulk and his version of the Thing. Like the Thing was just like a tombstone. It was like this great shape, and I'm like, wow, you can kind of interpret. You can really do what you want to do, and not kind of follow a house style. And so yeah, he was like artistically my muse. You know, I was trying to be like in art school. I had some real knockoff kind of bad Sienkiewicz stuff that I did in my illustration stuff. But
did you ever see our mutual friend Blake when he owns the What If cover, the whole What If Hulk?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He had that hanging up for a while. It's like I keep meaning to ask him if he still has it, but I think he might have sold it by now.
Well, he does. But,
He might.
Oh,
Blake, if you're watching, let us know.
He has a Sienkiewicz Hulk, that What If cover.
Yeah, he had that
Great
painting.
cover. That's a great cover.
Yeah, his aunt died. That's what.
No, it was guys like that doing like expressionistic artistic stuff, you know. So like then Frank Miller with Klaus Janson, and then well, the big one for me though, especially when I started working in comics, was David Mazzucchelli. Year One is like my comics go to, like comics Bible.
Yeah.
If you need any kind of storytelling advice while you're working on something, you're looking for a shot, you're looking for an angle, it's just like flip through that, and it's just so much inspiration. It's just so a lot of it's so understated, and I mean, you look at the stuff back then. I mean, what we can do now with color and production is so much more advanced than they had back then. But that stuff just sings. Kind of like we're talking about with Disney, traditional hand-drawn animation compared to the digital animation of today. They can do so much more with the computer, but it's still almost impossible to like equal Pinocchio and some of the Fantasia sequences. You know, just the visual. I don't know. Kind of, it transcends the hand and the pencil, and the computer just can't get it quite. You know, so.
Yeah.
But that's what it was for me. Like going in, starting out. The Swamp Thing was big for me too. The Steve Bissette Swamp Thing stuff. It was like, if it wasn't Alan Moore, it was Frank Miller for me. It was a back and forth. You know, those were the guys that really super inspired me to get into it. And I was going to be like, I wasn't just going to draw comics. I was going to write. I had all my crazy characters and stuff that I was going to do. But for whatever reason, it was like,
give us one.
Well, Barney the Burning Banker. That's actually published. That's in was it Piranha Press Phobias or Paradox Press? Phobias. Okay. That was my my thesis and my MFA was Barney was basically a guy who had his head on fire and suffered. He just worked 9 to 5 at a bank, and so he was like the 9 to 5 Prometheus. He would be chained to the desk. His boss was a big bird that would peck at his liver every day, and he'd go home and try not to set his whole building on fire with his head.
That sounds like something that Piranha, later Paradox, would do.
Yeah, it was. It's in a book called Phobias. And,
okay, all right. I'm not familiar. I remember the big. I remember when Piranha first started out, and it sounded so promising, and it was. There was some good Epicurious the Sage, Sam Keith, and Lopes. That's the most underrated graphic novel of the '90s, in my opinion. And
I was gonna found my desk over here. I've got a copy of that.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite books.
I'll grab Barney. He's right over here. Hang on a second.
Yeah, go ahead. While you're over there, what's that? Okay, that's your Julie Newmar you got on the wall, right?
Yeah.
Now, what's the page next to her?
That's a Batman page, from our run on Venom. So nice. It's just a copy of it, but can you see it? Okay.
Yeah.
That's Batman.
And of course, a little bit of trivia for people that aren't familiar with Venom. If you like the character of Bane,
yeah,
Bane's story begins with Venom because it's how he gets jacked up.
So yeah, this is the comic. It's actually my only writing credit, I think, in Phobias.
Oh wow!
I think it was still Paradox Piranha Press at the time.
Okay, yeah.
Paradox, and then so you can see the Yeah, there's a page from it. Yeah, well done, Pat.
Oh, that's Mike's.
Mike, so, well done. Yeah, and then you can see the Sienkiewicz influence here on the back, my cover credit. So,
nice.
Knockoff. But yeah, the story's in there, and it's basically the story is the death of Beowulf. Beowulf is Barney's pet goldfish, and he comes home and his goldfish is dead, and it was really his only friend. So Barney just lives to suffer, and he can't really can't bring himself to flush the goldfish. So he tries to give him a proper funeral by putting him in a box of matches and floating him out on the East River, lighting on fire, proper Viking funeral. But
why hasn't this character been at least optioned to be an Adult Swim series?
Oh, well, there's such a demand for Barney that I
How do you know people?
Well, you know those people too. You know those people better than I do. There's this. I could see little 12-minute minisodes of this guy. Yeah, this would work.
But yeah, I mean, who knows? I keep myself busy, so I don't have time to go out and find new things to do. But I keep threatening every time I finish a project. Okay, now it's time to do my own stuff, and because the world is clamoring for Barney the Burning Banker. Well, especially now. Now everyone will. But yeah, no, I keep my hand in some of my own stuff. I have a bunch of different ideas, and we'll see if anything comes out. But the work for hire has been, continuous. So I just keep going and work on my deadlines. So what propelled you from comics into Disney? Okay, yeah. So at SVA, as I was leaving, there was an internship opportunity at Disney. You had to apply and show them portfolios and stuff. Marshall Arison was the guy in charge of illustration there, but Jack Endewelt was running the undergraduate, and he asked me if I would. He said, even if you don't want to do it, would you mind just applying? We want to have some of our guys in that have hand skills, like the guys who can draw, to show them that we have. I said, no, that sounds great. Animation was one of my early inspirations to get into art in the first place. So, and I went to the internship. I got the job, and it was down in 91. So I just finished Batman and was doing War of the Gods, helping with George Perez, which is another great experience, and terrible experience. It was a terrible situation for everybody involved with that book. But I mean, for me, it was just I got to work with George Perez and one of my heroes. So I was actually down at the internship when we were still working on that book, and Disney wouldn't let me do it because they were convinced I was some kind of a Warner's spy or something because I worked for DC. Warner's animation at that time, it's 1991. They were finishing up Beauty and the Beast down there when I was doing my internship. So,
they thought you were a mole.
Yeah. But and I was still with jaded New Yorker, whatever comic book guy. But Disney won me over with the way that they did, the way the work was done, and the people there were great, and the other animators. So I learned basic animation there in 3 months. They offer you a job if you want to stay and do cleanup, which I didn't want to do. That was the part of the job I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
If you have story, I'll do storyboards maybe. And they're like, well, we don't do story down here. It was in Florida.
Yeah.
So they said, well, we'll call you if we need you or whatever. And I said, oh, yeah, sure you will. They called every year from that point on, from 92 through 97, just to see if you wanted to come down and do they always needed what HR called bodies. We need bodies this film. And
well, they also needed bodies because if you were at MGM's and those at the time, during the animation building tour, there's the glass, and we're supposed to be able to see the animators hard at work on the next.
I had a seat on the glass, yeah. So,
well, you got to figure that Disney at that time, they hadn't really been doing huge animation work in years. Then all of a sudden, I guess Little Mermaid, The Beauty and the Beast, that was just the restart of that whole Disney animate. For how many, over a decade, they were hell bent on erasing animation and working on just that on the live action stuff, right? It was a lot of Apple Dumpling Gang, kind of stuff, and not a whole lot of Disney animation. So, gotta remember, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, And on those, it was mostly older guys that had worked on animation previously. They needed new blood to work on Aladdin and whatever Hercules and all the stuff that was coming through in the 90s. So you're talking right in that time frame.
Absolutely. Renaissance, especially for hand drawn animation. I mean, there only was at that time. But, Beauty and the Beast was like when that came out. I mean, we were watching it being finished while we were there learning to do it. It was so inspiring. It was such a great movie. I mean, it still holds up. It's one of the. I actually got to draw one cell, one pencil on it. It's just in the back, like when Beast is like dead, and his heart, his chest just starts beating a little bit. It's like I got to draw the black line over someone else's red line.
That's cool.
And so it's not credited, but it's like I know that I did one thing on Beauty.
You can point to that movie and say
that's the scene. That's So.
Did you ever see the Laserdisc?
No, I never did.
I remember on the Laserdisc. I don't know if it's on the DVD, but I remember the Laserdisc. You could play the movie like in the unfinished version, like the hand drawn, unfinished. No color. They had
a pencil version. Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, this pencil because we get to see the stuff when you're there, from like story reels to pencil tests to whatever. And I used to like when you go to see the rough cut of the film before it was done. You could see some things were just storyboards with scratch dialogue that where your friends were doing it, and then there'd be pencil test animation, then there'd be finished animation, then there'd be like it would just jump back and forth. You could still feel the story, you could feel it coming to life. And see all the changes that happened along the way. So, but yeah, so I did the internship. I went back to New York. I kept working in comics, trying to really break big. I thought, because you start with Batman and like, wow, this thing's selling like, 500,000 copies. So only up from here. And then no, not so much. It was just smaller jobs here and there, and kind of got crazy trying to do the freelance thing. You're just trying to stay on top of it. And I was kind of wearing out. I had a graphic novel I was going to do with Jamie Delano for Paradox Press, and it was going to be about 300 pages in three. It was the Paradox Mysteries. So I was working on this thing, Bad Blood, got about 150 pages done, and then Paradox was no more. It was never going to be published, and I said, well, it's about time I answer one of these calls from Disney. They just happened to call like right when things were at its lowest, and said, we have a movie called Mulan. Would you like to come down, help us with cleanup? And then we know you want to do story. So after you're done with Mulan, you'll start in the story training program that we're going to open up in Florida. And I said, wow, great. I'm there. And I cashed in my last bond from when I was a kid, and flew down to Florida and started working for Disney. So, jumped in on Mulan, relearned how to do cleanup, which I hated. I held my breath doing it, like doing that final line, getting everything perfect. And because I'm more of a sketchy, kind of crazy, energetic artist, So, but it was great to learn to do it. By the third week there, we were doing overtime, and by the fourth week, we were doing round the clock, like 7-day overtime. So, but we finished it, and like I said, a steady paycheck for a freelance artist is something not to be sneezed at. So it was a great experience. I stayed much longer than I should have. The story department was, well, let's just say it never materialized. But HR, HR, human resources at any company is going to do the best they can for that company. They hired me 2 days after I would have been eligible for a bonus. And then they also never did a story training program. So, but hey.
Yeah, you were there. You were there. You did the work, and obviously tremendous. And yeah, it can't hurt to have that on your resume. And again, you like the apprenticeship under the comic side of it. You really kind of came in when the door was closing on that way of doing animation.
Are you saying that I killed Disney?
Maybe you were a mole for Warner's all along.
No. But yeah, no, it was one of those things. I stayed for 7 years until the studio closed, just because even though I kind of wanted to leave and move on to something else, I had nothing else planned. I had health coverage and a steady paycheck. so I stayed, and I ended up working on Mulan, Tarzan, Emperor's New Groove. Those two were just helping. We were helping California for those, because Florida, we had our own films. Mulan was our own film, which was like, we were so proud of that, you know. Lilo and Stitch, which I was super proud of, to work on. Jumba, you know, was a character with my team I got to work on.
That's great.
Brother Bear. And then that was it. Then things kind of started to wind down. The computer was taken over. Yeah. And justifiably, I mean, the amount of people you need to do a hand-drawn film and the amount of time it takes to do it, it has to be a passion project now, because I wouldn't want to do it again. I mean, honestly, it's too much work to do it that way. But the results sometimes are so beautiful that it's hard to, you know. I mean, Pixar's films are probably my favorite, especially the modern films. But you look back on even some of the animation in the 50s, but for me, it's like Pinocchio is like a magical work of art. Snow White, you know, Fantasia. So, but yeah, to have been a part of that is great. And the best thing that came out of it for me artistically was that stuff I hated doing, the cleanup part of it. I brought it right back to comics, and I got cleaner with my pencils to the point where I could shoot off my pencils. So yeah, it was, you know, you gain something from every experience you have, and you might not see it at the time, but those 7 years fed into my, you know, second coming into comics. So yeah.
All right, so you come back to comics.
Yeah.
Where do you land? What's your first thing?
Checking back in with all my old friends from DC and Marvel and seeing if they have work. I was never good at that. The hustle part of it, you know, like hey, you got work. I always felt I was embarrassed to do it. So, but I checked in with people who were still in the business and found out if there was any kind of you know, entry-level jobs, basically, again, just starting out again. And I got some small things here and there. There was like Cracked.com was starting up, and they were going to do a comic to start, and I got to do a couple of goofy things for them. And
was that with Dick?
I don't know who.
Culpa? Dick Culpa?
No, I didn't work directly with him, if that's who it was. But no, we did a Winnie the Pooh meets Deadwood story.
Okay.
.com. So it was 100 Acre Deadwood, it was called, and it was pretty mean. But it was mean, and it was kind of funny because I'd just been back from Disney. So and then we did a Narnia and George Bush one, like, you know, that was also weird. But no, I ended up doing some stuff with Marvel first, which was odd. I ended up meeting some guys at Marvel through other mutual friends, and I did like a Where Monsters Dwell Kirby monster story, and Cyforce, like from the new universe. I did like a quick. It's always busy, quick stuff, you know. So, but then I was just about to give up on comics again and find something else to do, and the Fables universe came calling. So I had remembered I'd known Shelley Bond for years back in the beginning of Vertigo when I was doing Swamp Thing and Animal Man, and so they needed somebody to come in and help on Jack of Fables. I ended up being like everybody's like I was the guy you called when there was a leak. You know, I was like the plumber, the cleaner. I was Victor, the cleaner. You know, I would come in and just like, yes, I will fix this, and I would end up drawing. I ended up doing like a whole bunch on Jack of Fables. It was like an instant audition where I would do sketches of what Jack might look like in my style and what Snow White might look like in my style. So I just winged it overnight, sent the stuff in. They're like, "Oh, you're done?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, you need it tomorrow, right?" So they're like, "Yeah, great, go ahead." And so I did that. Oh, actually, I forgot. Before that, I was also doing some stuff with Marvel that I was hoping was going to lead to bigger things. It was that Son of Satan job. I penciled it, and Klaus Janson inked it. It's just like, you know, you get to work with legendary Klaus Janson.
Yeah.
And that was a really fun project, and it didn't really go anywhere. So it was just kind of like, then you wait, and they're like, "We love this. We'll find something else for you." And then they never call back. So you just kind of keep looking until, you know, Fables was a godsend. It was just kind of like a great group of people. It was like the Fables family, we called it. You know, it sounds corny. Bill Willingham was the guy in charge of all of it, and
Yeah.
Matt Sturgis, Lila Sturgis, was writing most of the Jack of Fable stuff with Bill. And I sometimes forget how much I got out of doing that stuff. I met Mark Buckingham, great guy, and we worked together a lot. And, that kind of was like, with that, I became in comics again, so.
I knew of his work with Kamiko and Fathom and Elementals, but I never read those titles. But I know Willingham is the guy that did Ironwood with a smutty fantasy comic. So when I heard Fables or whatever, I was like, isn't that the guy that does the kind of porny stuff? But yeah, then of course
I knew him from illustration stuff for Dungeons and Dragons, like from
that too.
And I didn't know he wrote at the time. I mean, I'd only known him from stuff, and I loved his drawings from the Dungeons and Dragons stuff, But yeah, so it was great to do that stuff. It was just. I sometimes forget how much I did of Jack of Fables and Fairest, and there was always a job. They were always needing stuff, and there was always deadline trouble. So it was like, call in the cleaner. I was like the guy with the mop.
It's funny. A couple months ago, we had Keith Dickman on, and he was kind of that way for the superhero titles.
Yeah.
So it seems like you were that role maybe for like the Vertigo stuff or all the basically non-superhero projects.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff. And Keith, Keith Kiffin, you're saying, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I got to learn from him too. I forgot early on. It was like my second job was a JLA issue where Guy Gardner takes Ice out on a date.
The date, yeah.
The ice and that was like Keith does like a you get a visual script from him, like thumbnails of everything, and then the DeMatteis script with it. So it's kind of like two scripts in one, visual and dialogue. So
nice. Another
way to learn storytelling. But yeah, so
he's our favorite Grouch.
He's a great guy. So.
Hey Keith, it's your birthday! Happy birthday! Shut up.
Yep.
Okay.
With love, So,
that's what it is. That's what absolutely I just adore.
But we went from
that issue, right?
Yeah, Jack of Fables. I was working on Jack of Fables, and that was that's the one. Adam Hughes cover, and Adam Hughes did the framing drawings, the framing sequence, like a couple of pages. So you can always tell if you open the book who did what. People are like, "Did you do this page?" I'm like, "No, that's Adam Hughes." So. It was great. And again, that was back in the day when you'd go up to the DC offices, hang out with the editors, and another editor would pop his head in and say hi. He's like, "Hey, are you free to do? I need an issue with this." And that's how you got work. It was like I didn't have to like call on the phone and go, "Please, will you give me something to draw?" And I got lucky. It was just a lot of it's being in the right place at the right time.
I knew SVA guys who would just hang out in the Marvel and DC lobby.
Yeah.
They would just hang out there all day and say, "Can you tell this editor here, tell this editor?" And maybe they never get called on in. And so it was like you worked your way up. And then you were considered a budding talent that were like, "Yeah, come on in." Once you got inside and you meet people and you got cover for that thing. I like that one. Hey, I might use you. And so that was what you were in the trenches,
Yeah, there were a lot of guys that had the talent. They just never got the break. And some of those guys it was better for because then they ended up doing their own thing. And they learned their own stuff, put out their own thing, and held on to their own, properties. So I'm happy the way I did things. I'm happy with the way things went that I got to do, draw the actual characters that I loved growing up. But for a lot of guys starting out, like when they come to me for advice at a convention or something, I said, just do your own thing. Hang on to your own thing. And you don't have to try and struggle to be the next Batman artist or the next Spider-Man artist. It's like, if you want that, do your own thing and maybe it'll come to you instead of trying to do that first. I think I might have gone about it the wrong way as far as that goes. It would have been better for me to do more independent stuff instead of starting out jumping onto Batman the first thing. Like, it's kind of like, I wasn't afraid. I just kind of like did it. And if I had to do it now, I'd be terrified. I'd love to draw Batman again, but I'd be like, oh my God, it's Batman, so.
You're the classic improvisation. Do people say, can you do this? And you're like, yes, and.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was, and And there isn't anybody that wouldn't, nobody who calls themselves an artist or comic artist who wouldn't jump to the opportunity to draw Batman at what, like 22, 23 or
22, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're not going to turn. You got to take it, and it gets you established.
And you do the best you can. I mean, I forgot the Batman thing is I started drawing the Batman story myself. I mean, with no layout advice or anything. And I did 14 pages on my own. We had a really long lead time on it, and I brought it into editor Andy, and he was like, "Yeah, it's good. We can use this." And I'm like, but it's not there. I was having a problem getting my characters to like just fit in the panels, because I was drawing right on the boards. I wasn't using Lightbox like I do now, where you can just shift things around wherever you want it. And,
sure.
So it was like I would get the drawing right, but it was in the wrong position by about like a half an inch. So it was kind of like the border hit the character in a weird spot, and they always seem to be like aware. I was joking about this, like aware of the borders, like it's cutting through the shoulder, and you kind of see him like looking at it, like what is that doing there? So all my characters were overly aware of the borders, and so I just was uncomfortable with putting it out there. And he said, "Well, we're going to get a great inker, so don't worry about it." And he did, but instead I was like, I'd rather like just not use these pages, start all over. I was hoping Carmine was available to do it, because Carmine drew Batman for years, and I'd work with him on Ford Fairlane, but he wasn't free. So Trevor came in and did a great job, and I just worked right over that. But,
Mike brought Carmine to his last appearance at the last show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was 2012, right, Patty?
It was before I joined you, but I think that sounds about right. Yeah, from what you told me.
Was he down in Florida then?
No, I flew him in from New York. I think he walked through New York Comic Con after our show, which would have been the last time he walked in a convention.
Right.
But we were the first, I think, real. It was 2012. So it was the 2012 show. I had him and I had Neil at that show. And yeah, I mean, he was, and then after that, I think that was summer, and then summer of 2012, and then in, I guess, October 2012, he showed up. He was in New York Comic Con for a few hours, and then that was the last time he made a public appearance.
Yeah.
So, Carmine.
Yeah, I only got to see him once more after I got back from Florida, just at a convention briefly in New York, like 2005 or something like that. Just, I don't even think he was there. He just was visiting a friend, but it was just good to see him. And yeah, it's kind of like, it's one of those things. If you're a comics fan and you like the history of comics, when you see the older guys at a convention, go up and tell them thanks. I think that's the least you can do. But I mean, talk to them. Tell them that if what they did meant something to you. It's one of the things we kind of live for. I mean, I do too. It's like I never really did many conventions. It was kind of like not a whole lot of call for it. But I've enjoyed doing them for the last few years a lot. And there's not too many jobs out there where people come up and tell you, "Hey, I like what you do." If you're a librarian, there's not a lot of people coming up to you going like, "You stock those shelves better than anybody else." So it's just and especially if they get down the line to someone who's not, a fan favorite or whatever. Just it's well appreciated, believe me. So don't hesitate.
We've always made it a thing to bring in older creators into our shows, and Patty can testify to that.
Yes.
And it's always look, there are. I mean, I can't tell you how many guys we've had and gals that we've had at the shows that are no longer with us. And, a lot of them we go in knowing this is going to be their last appearance, Al Plastino, Nick Hardy, Carmine, that a lot of people that just kind of were their last hurrah. And these guys, if you're a fan and you're a fan of, you take every last chance you can get to see and meet, these people before the end. We're about to do one of our virtual shows with Rico Browning, who's the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
He's the last Universal monster.
Right.
That's it, right? And he's not a spring chicken. And we're going to announce him this week. And it's like, you want something from that. You want to meet this guy, or you want to, this is your time to meet him. Like, there's not a whole lot of, I wish I coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
And I always feel like that with the comic guys. I mean, we just lost Denny O'Neil, who we had, at the shows. I can't tell you how many times. And, on so many levels, the older guys, they're not really working so much, if at all. And so they rely on these shows as a form of income. So that helps them in their retirement. Because, the freelancers don't have the greatest retirement benefits packages. And so, it does help. And then B, it never hurts for somebody to hear, that they have fans.
Yeah.
It's always nice, that you worked hard your whole life, you did something. And then here come people that are like, oh, you did great stuff, thank you. And, it makes people feel good.
Absolutely. I have a regret with that. I get shy around the guys that I was a huge fan of. There's guys like, I met Frank Miller twice, but I didn't say anything. I was in an elevator with him in DC. Didn't say a word. Just like we got further back in an elevator than I could. But the one that really bothered me was that I was down in Florida at Disney, and Gil Kane was at the convention there. It was one of my first conventions I ever went to, not as a professional. I went as a fan. And, and then there's Gil Kane. And I'm like, I should go say hi to Gil Kane. I'm like, it's one of my idols. And I didn't, just because I didn't want to bother him. And I don't know if he was busy or not. And I didn't know what to say. I would stammer over my words. But and he passed away not long after that. So it was really kind of like my last chance. So out there, take the chance if we ever can do conventions again. We will.
We will. Yeah. It'll be a year and a half, 2 years, or whatever. But we'll get back. I mean, this is not the first time in human history, and when we do, take the opportunity. Like you said, you're a little shy about going towards these guys, and I used to be. I had to get over it, because it's like you never know if you're going to see these guys again, and we've lost some. You get older, the heroes of our childhood, not to be too maudlin, and take the chance when you got it.
And the other thing about the shows that's great is that you meet a lot of new talent too. Like, I get guys that come up to me to do work and say, hey, can you give me some advice or whatever. And I've actually had people come up to me with stuff, and I send them to another guy. I'm like, go talk to this guy right now. And people get work. It's
look, we've had artists at our show who got jobs with Marvel, and we've had people at our shows get jobs with independents a lot and start their careers. But I mean, I've had people who got jobs at Marvel through our shows that were local artists. Jeff DeCal, was a guy who's setting up at our shows in Miami for a couple of years. And we hooked him up with Lauren at Marvel. She was an editor, and she gave him a gig. And he does pretty well for himself now.
Yeah. It's all a matter of getting the foot in the door,
Yeah.
And then when you have the foot in the door, doing the job.
Yeah, don't screw up.
Reliable. But
right.
that thing is, like, when we were talking about, like, getting the Fables work for me was it because I ended up doing like more than 1 or 2 issues in a row. You end up having some street cred again,
Yeah.
And I was already back in touch with Garth. We were just drinking buddies. We would hang out on Fridays, and
Garth Ennis drinks.
Well, yeah, once in a while, but we would. I would never. I didn't want to really work with him because we were friends, and I didn't want to screw that up. Like by doing something, by not being ready for that kind of whatever level of work. So, but when he asked me to do we worked on a book together that was a passion project for him. It was a war story, and that was a great experience. So I sometimes forget the order of it, because I think that The Boys came first, but no, The Night Witches was first, which was a great story to work on. Like, based in reality, the World War II Russian women bomber pilots, and just a fascinating story. We ended up doing 3 separate issues, 3 separate miniseries of that 9 issues altogether. But we started doing that. And
he has a passion for the Russian side of World War II, the Russian Germans, the Russian front.
Well, he looks. It's an area that he didn't have a lot of information on, so it's like he found something new to go to.
Yeah.
So it's been his. I mean, his obvious favorite is like the Battle of Britain, the air stuff. Like Nazis, British planes. That's all. He's all about that. But if he can find part of something that he loves, the World War II stuff that he hasn't really dug into before, he's like is after it like a terrier. He's like found all this stuff. There was an old book called Johnny Red that had the Night Witches in it, and he researched it and found it, and was like, I'm just going to do this. And he loves his war stories. That's like the most passionate stuff. He's the only hard thing doing it is that you have to make sure you get all the material right, all the guns and the which is difficult, but easier now that you have the internet. So.
Hey, exactly. Like going back to the Fort Fairlane thing, we talked about how we're having to research what these guys look like in the 70s and everything else. Like you had to go through magazines and the library and
the collection. You ever go there?
Yeah.
The New York Public Library collection.
Yeah, that's something that old school artists used to have. They would have photograph files. Files and reams of reference stuff, clipping, just anything that they thought would look cool. So
the swipe file is what it's called.
So all right. So how did you get started with the boys?
Okay, yeah. So I was doing the Night Witches with Clark, and that worked out great. I left that. We finished that one up. Went back to some more Jack of Fables because it was off and on. Jack of Fables was Tony Akins. It was his book, and then when he would do an arc, then I would come on and do the next arc or something. So I was coming to be free again, and we did a second arc of Night Witches called Motherland. And so we were doing that, and the boys ended up he needed somebody to come in and do one arc on the boys. It was like in trouble deadline-wise. So he's like, can you come in? They were looking for some consistency. A lot of guys were coming in, and Carlos Esquerra had done some, and John Higgins, John McCrae, these great artists coming in to, because I guess Derek was like, had other stuff he was doing, and he couldn't commit to the full time on the boys anymore. So none of us knew it. We just kind of came in and did our bit. So he asked me to do it, and I said no. I was like, I'm not going to touch the boys. That's yours. That's yours and Derek's. It's nothing to do with me. It was my favorite thing he was working on at the time. So I was afraid to really ruin that one. If I didn't do a good job. So I said, well, listen, over the weekend, this was on a Friday night at the bar, and he said, well, think about it. And he's like, what's the worst that could happen? That's Garth's line with everything. It's like, come on, one story arc. What's the worst that can happen? It's like the end of the boys, end of our friendship. That's the worst that could happen. So, but no, over the weekend I tried. I did some drawings of Butcher, and the first 2 or 3 were so bad that it was like he looked like a linebacker. Like I gave him like this giant neck, and it was just that's not Butcher. And I was about to give up and just call him and tell him, listen, I can't do this. And then I did this drawing of Butcher that was just like, with one drawing, I got the character. I was like, I got him. I know he's the guy who's got this little smile that's like 5 steps ahead of everybody else. So as soon as you get into that mindset, and I could draw him, it's like as soon as I drew his face and put the hair on, you have to fill in the black in the hair, or it's not Butcher. It's like it looks weird. But anyway, so it worked out, and I said, all right, I'll do it. We can do it. It was going at the same time concurrent with the Night Witches, so I had to do 2 books at once.
Wow.
Didn't get it done. And that's when I started working in just pencil. Instead of inking it, I inked the first Night Witches myself with ink. And this was just, I'm going to try and do it with pencil with a big scanner. And so it saved a little bit of time. And I did it. So I did the whole first story arc. It was a great experience. It was fun, crazy stuff. It was the Believe arc where Father and the Capes for Christ and all that stuff was in there. So where Annie reveals to Huey that she's Starlight, unlike the show, which is like, yeah, it should be pretty obvious, but issue like 45 before he knew who she was. So and so I finished that and I was like, okay, great, this was good. I was exhausted because it was like we literally were doing it like you start beginning of the month, it was due to print before the end of the month. So and each one in a row like that. then they said, "Hey, can you do the next story arc too?" And I was like, "Oh man, I don't have anything lined up, but all right, I'll try it." And went ahead and did that, and I did that story arc. And then they were like, "Can you do the next one?" I'm like, "I can't." I ended up with pneumonia. I was like literally physically couldn't do it. So, but at the time we didn't know. I never knew from issue to issue whether I was going to do the next one or not. I'm like I say, "Is Derek coming back or what?" And I likened it to like Princess Bride, like the Dread Pirate Roberts. It was like, "You did a great job today, Wesley, but I'll likely kill you tomorrow, whatever." So
yeah,
like I was kind of like, am I going to be doing the next one or the next one? I didn't know if I was doing the next issue, the next arc, until after I took that little bit of a break. John McCrae came in and did the World War II section, and then I did the last 16 before Derek came back to do the final issue. So it was like 16 issues in a row. Then I felt like, all right, I'm in the game 100% now. I'm like a monthly artist, and you just threw out whatever you could get and threw it and see if it would stick. And there had to cut as many corners as possible, but put in as much effort as you can. And it just, it kind of like was a trial by fire getting all that stuff done. And I wouldn't change a thing. It was great. I love it. So.
You trial by fire, but you came out the other side.
Yeah, I literally survived. I was hoping to at the end of it.
And you succeeded.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's just
you absolutely succeeded.
There's some of that stuff. I love drawing the Flatiron Building. No, the Flatiron Building was. I drew it like 3 or 4 times, and then I realized I live in New York City. I'm going to go take my own photographs of it and digitize it, and pop them in the background now. So I would mask it as best as I could, but it was like saving me time and effort. I also got to go to the top of the Empire State Building for the first time in my life to take pictures to see if I could make the end sequence work, and or at least fake it enough. But yeah. No, there's stuff I worked on in The Boys that's like I think that looking back in comics history, that there's stuff that if my name's known in comics history, it'd be for some of the stuff I did on The Boys. Like the Jack from Jupiter end scene is like one of my favorite things I ever got to work on. Disturbing as hell, but and then the very last issue I worked on, the second to last issue. So now this is the new stuff. This is back to we're doing new issues of The Boys called The Boys, Dear Becky, and it's basically a diary that was Becky's diary. If you read Butcher Baker Candlestick Maker, that Butcher held on to. He tore out all of her pages and just started writing to her, and that book somehow finds its way into Huey's hands 12 years later. And so it tells some of the backstory of how Butcher became Butcher, and really fun stuff. Really more on the character-driven side of it. It's not super action-packed, but there's plenty of the regular Boys depravity in there.
Well, interesting thing about the character, and again, no spoilers. And I've again people
that we talk about the sex vicar.
Sure. Sex Vicar was it's a brilliant design of mine, I will say too. But
I think really, of all your design work that you've ever done, it's but the Ponsing Poof is
I like that design actually. That was a fun one, but I like his popped collar. But no, these guys are supposed to be. It's a new team of soups that
gotta love the popped collar.
They are they're like the absolute stereotype of all that's bad at the time, and they're meant to be. I mean, so it's kind of like it's forcing the issue, and I was wondering about it when I was drawing it, but I mean, people who read Garth's stuff, they have to know that you're going to get this kind of thing. He's going to create controversy, and but it's all for a reason, I mean, would I want to work on a comic book of a whole character called Black Thug? No. But to have him start a conversation by being in a comic book is totally worthwhile.
But how about a comic book about the Ponsing Poof?
Ponsing Poof would be just as problematic. I mean,
you don't think you can get 140 issues out of that?
At least. No. No, I mean, you can take a character like that and you can actually have something to say with it. And again, it's not what he's going for here. This is more just about the stereotypical versions of all these kind of characters that this kind of I can't even explain. He's a British guy who's starting his own team of superheroes outside of law, and so that's the controversy there within the comic, and he's kind of like just a media guy. So
so I think that answers. Well, Erin says she would read it.
Oh yeah, well,
probably the 100 issues of the Ponsing Poof. That's what I think Erin is referring to, and I think we answered Ray's question about any new projects.
Well, the current project is the new project. So I am like now I'm back to the same deadline I had back on the beginning of the boys. So it's just with COVID and everything, we're down to like I'm cranking out an issue right as the next one's coming out. So, but we're gonna get it done. There are 8 issues altogether, and so
let's talk about your most important project. Sorry, let's talk about your most important project. Patty has brought to my attention, your most important project. Let me bring this up. So.
You'll know when you see. Yeah. Well.
Is that a Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man I see?
Yeah, I had a break when the whole thing. This is actually earlier, but I have like this fascination with the Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man from when I was a kid.
Hold that. I'll be right back. You keep talking. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As a kid, I was mortified with the show because it wasn't what I expected. You know, I was bragging in the schoolyard to kids. Oh, it's going to be the greatest show ever. And it's $6 million man is nothing compared to Spider-Man and blah blah blah. That's what it was up against, you know. And then the first episode comes on, the pilot, and he's getting whacked with bamboo sticks by these ninja guys. And I was kind of like, really? And he hit a guy, and the guy gets back up. I'm like, well, if he hit that guy, it's like back to like comic nerd stuff where it's like, well, you know, he has the power to lift 15 tons. And if he punched a guy, he would be unconscious. And so, but it stuck with me. It was kind of like it's all we had at the time. And
Broder, what do you got there?
What's that?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But so I've always loved it, and the character was great, and the scenes.
Mike, make that full screen. Keep talking.
Go full screen on that. Yeah, that's the film version, the British version of the second 2 episodes together. They made it into
right. I have the other poster hanging in another part of the office, but it's framed and hanging. So
yeah,
I get to it.
I have, you know, I love that stuff, and so I spent like a month doing like my version of what maybe the villains would look like if they did the villains on the show. So casting with actual actors from the time frame, and like I kind of did like a deep dive into my own little rabbit hole there. So yeah, there's the Enforcers. So John Saxon, who just passed as
oh my, yeah.
Fancy Dan.
Ox would be Alex Karras, and Warren Oates as Montana. So, you know, a little bit on the nose with a lot of that, but stuff like that. So I spent some time, like while I was waiting for the boys to be, we were furloughed off of it. That was my joke, but it's actually pretty good casting. He would never do it, but I wanted to have guys you could actually cast who would actually have been.
Who were we talking about yesterday, Patty, for Green Goblin?
Well, here's the thing. Russ made it a gag on his Facebook. He was like, "This could be." He made it a big week, and he was like putting hints. Oh, it could be this person. Yeah. Pull up the green face one, because that was his design for the live action Goblin in.
All right, the gargoyle mask. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I have those drawings right around here somewhere. So.
But Russ made it a go. So I wonder who could this be, and we were all pitching ideas on the page. I suggested Campbell from Star Trek. I just thought he had yeah.
I gave all these options, and Charlton Heston wasn't one of them. So
yeah, you cheated.
I came up with that. Like last minute. But it ended up Frank Gorshin won. So it was between him and Anthony Perkins and Anthony Zerbe, I think. So, but yeah, there were a bunch of those guys. And there's the Goblin. That was the
oh, beautiful. And again, I love how you really you captured the aesthetic of, okay, they weren't going to do the real costumes that, again, we as kids wanted. So how would they not screw it up, but how would they do it for TV? Yeah,
with their budget and with the the way things looked at the time. So that's what I try to do. The one I kind of started with the whole thing was Craven, which I thought could have been, William Smith would definitely be Craven and didn't really have to do much. He's like, in fact, he played a Native American warrior in a Western show. And I found reference. It was like a little tiny postage stamp piece of reference. I'm like, I don't even have to draw it. That's Craven right there. So, but no, I spent some time just having fun with that. And yeah, hell, if there was a chance to do that as an actual project for Marvel, I would do it in a second. Just
Spider-Man 78. Hell yeah.
But they've kind of, the whole thing is there are fan groups and stuff that I follow on Facebook for the Spider-Man stuff, and Electro.
Richard Lynch,
yeah. He comes pre-scarred and
God, poor guy.
But again, you figure I read up on that too. It was kind of really sad, but
it became his ticket. That's the weird thing.
Sure. So, but yeah, that was a lot of fun to do this stuff. It was like, just to keep me. It was really to keep myself sane during the beginning of quarantine and not knowing how this stuff was going and not knowing we were furloughed on, not going to get paid for anything we were working on. I had the scripts, but I just couldn't dig into it to do I should have been further ahead, but it would have been on my own time anyway.
I don't know. I think this is a fun project. I think you did. All right here. I think this is really cool.
Yeah, I'm probably going to put it all together in a sketchbook. I usually do a sketchbook every year for the conventions, but this year I haven't put it together because I don't have a convention to go to.
What do we got here? Oh no.
Yeah. Scorpion. There's Richard Lynch. So they're just in the sketchbook, and then I play around with it in Photoshop. So.
Yeah, kids today, I have no idea. Like we had Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man. We had Hulk.
Honestly, from the time, people, it's easy. I know you can look at it and go, "Oh, that's crap." That's not Spider-Man. There's no Uncle Ben. Blah blah blah. But then you have like the stunt work by Fred Waugh, actually climbing those buildings, and it's ridiculous. It's just that he actually did that with the camera on his head. So.
It was something. Something's better than nothing. And remember, you're looking at the only person who has ever cosplayed as Doctor Strange since 1978.
Oh man, I love that movie though.
Which actually is a good one. I don't know, all that stuff, and then you end up meeting a lot of these guys at the shows. As Russ Braun, Captain America was at one show, and I did finally draw the Luke Ferrigno Hulk and Spider-Man together, which was kind of fun too. So I had a lot of requests for that, but yeah, it's you grow up with stuff and it becomes your inspiration. And then you got to harken back to it sometimes for nostalgia's sake, at the very least.
Have you ever done a jam of all the 70s Marvel characters in one piece yet?
No, I haven't. So
it looked real good in Mike's office. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to go for that at some point. Next time I have any free time.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's a moment we were overjoyed with as kids. It's like little skinny guy who knows karate. It's like, not a problem, but at least he's got his webs. So,
and there's another thing that you pick up on when you have spare time. Frankenstein Fridays.
Right. Yeah. I still take time to do that every Friday. It started out as just a Facebook joke because I joined Facebook. I wasn't on any social media until 2013. So I joined and I figured I got to do an image a day to make it worth my while, or I just hopefully be inspirational to somebody, So every day I'll put up something I'm working on or something new. And then a Friday came around, I had nothing to put up, and I had just done a drawing of Frankenstein, and I heard about Throwback Thursday, so I said, well, it's Frankenstein Friday, and put it up. And then people were like, I said, that's a thing, right? And people were like, it should be a thing. Next Friday, I had like the second better, the drawing I didn't like of Frankenstein from the week before, but had nothing else to put up. Like, all right, I'll put up the less good drawing of Frankenstein. And then each day I kept putting up a Frankenstein on Friday until it became like kind of a curse. I don't know. So every Friday since I think 2014 or 2015, I've done some version of Frankenstein. It's mostly Karloff, a lot of Frankenberry. And I have a whole monster cereal story with Count Chocula and all those guys. I would never use their actual names, but so I wouldn't get sued. But
does it include the Fruit Brute?
Well, oh yeah, Fruit Brute and Yummy Mummy's in there too, and
nice
Blueberry.
You've done some really good deep dives though into like the other kind of cinematic types of stuff, and again, I'm the only person who's ever cosplayed as the Edison Frankenstein. So that's
one I have to draw. I haven't drawn him yet. I have.
I'll send you pictures of me as reference.
That actually might help because the real pictures aren't really that good. So the best ones I have for reference are either cosplay pics or someone did a sculpture.
There's the classic shot of Olga V. Like
I'm not going to do that. I try not to do like, working for reference, like as a comic book artist. It's great. It's like playing the scales, but you've got to meet the deadline. So unless you have time to get reference for every single picture, if you've got like one page with this brilliant panel that looks just like the guy, and then every other panel is like inferior to it, like realistically, you failed your job because you have to kind of keep the world consistent to make people read it. That's the way to tell the story. So you don't want to have like one drawing that's so much better or so much worse. It's like, so I like doing this stuff from reference and the likenesses just to kind of build up the memory banks, so it's like, oh, look at that. Like the way that nostril kind of bends or turns. And I can bring that into that's an expression Butcher might have, so, but it only goes so far with that, so I never want to do I don't like to use the actual photo reference you find on the internet because they're famous photos. They're already somebody's artwork. So I go to YouTube and I'll get like the grainiest, crappiest video and just freeze frame through the way and either take a screen cap or just draw right from it. And
because we won't mention names, but there are some people who are very famous for Google something and the very first image, and they're using that to start their artwork. It's like the very first image, bro. Really? You couldn't even pick the third one? Yeah.
Hell, I mean, you do it because you want to do it. You want to make it look right, but at the same time, you can't get your own kind of expression in there if it's already a famous photograph. It's like
exactly
if you're going to draw the Jim Morrison pose, everyone's going to know it. They have something to compare it to.
Yeah.
Go ahead, draw the Mona Lisa. It's been done, so you're going to be gauging it based on that. So I get away with my kind of like likenesses by not being that perfect with them, just kind of like going from lesser reference if you can. So it's like it is the character, but it's not exactly one you've seen before. Like Julie Newmar, I draw Catwoman all the time too, and I try and find like
another favorite of mine.
Sure. I try and find older pictures of her like in her pinup days, and then I turn it into Catwoman. So it's not like a Catwoman picture from the Batman show that you've seen 1,000 times, or like the actual, ones that she signs for people. So my friend Steve Bunch asked me, he was going to go meet her at ChillerCon, and he said, "Would you like to give her a drawing? You're always drawing her." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do a drawing for Julie Newmar. This would be great. Just give it to her." And so he brought it to her, and she was like, at first, like, "Oh, great," It's like, "I've got a drawing a fan did for you," and she loved it. So she was like, "Wait, let me send something back." So that's why she signed that photograph and sent it back to me because
nice.
I gave her the drawing. So it's just a nice feeling, So, but you know.
So what's the dream project? Someone gives you the unlimited funds to do whatever.
It's Barney the Burning Banker. No, I don't know. I honestly, I have a lot of horror stuff that I'm working on my own time. So I will probably try and do my own 12-issue maxi series book of thing I call the Pumpkin Man. So that would be my own personal project, but I would still love to. I would love to do that the Frankenberry monster serial. But Ahoy Comics, you guys know them. They do great stuff. They did The Wrong Earth. They're putting out Second Coming. Russell. Yes. So Mark Russell had actually used Frankenberry.
Richard Pace, yeah.
Yeah, Richard Pace on it. He's great. But he used Frankenberry and Count Chocula in one of the Edgar Allan Poe Snifter of Terror stories. So, it's like I was going to do that. And apparently he wrote a bunch of Frankenberry fan fiction before he got comic work. And he's killing it now. He's like one of the top writers in the field. And so I just met him briefly at the New York Comic Con. I was like, I have a bone to pick with you about Frankenberry. He's like, oh, great, nice way to meet somebody. But no, he's a great guy, and I would love to do that monster serial story. It's goofy and fun, and it's probably the only goofy fun story I have of my own. But yeah, no, my next, if I had my, if I had the money and the time, I would do some of my own stories just to get it out there. It's about time. But and the second answer would be Spider-Man. Yeah, I would have to do some kind of Spider-Man thing before this is all over. He was my hero going in. I was a kid in Queens, growing up, Richmond Hill, watching Spider-Man cartoon, Ralph Bakshi cartoon, and reading about it and finding he was like a guilt-ridden Catholic type kid growing up in Queens. So like,
well, hang on. So the Ralph Bakshi cartoon. So
yeah.
So how old are you?
I am 53.
Wow, you don't look it. I thought you were closer to my age and Patty's. So, all right. So the Bakshi cartoons make sense because I come around with the with Spider-Man: The Amazing Friends.
Sure.
I saw the Bakshi cartoons later, and I was always excited to see Spider-Man on the Electric Company. Like,
yeah,
the whole reason I would watch that show was for the 2 minutes of Spider-Man not saying a damn thing.
Absolutely. No, and again, I had I'm a Spider-Man junkie. It was like anything that he was on or in, I would be on. I was there for it. Like again, years before the internet, so you had to really
Spider-Man. Where's Spider-Man? Where's Spider-Man? Rule the world for a secret island base.
Looking more like the Sidney Greenstreet version of
yeah. Yeah, that was yeah. I was obviously I'm right between you guys. So I did grow up with the Bakshi Spider-Man, and again, it was always that weirdness of I hope it's like the first season where they have the actual villains and not like those other 50 weird ass ones. Which I've grown to appreciate them a lot more. But they were disturbing as a kid. They were genuinely creepy.
Yeah, they're weird show. It's a very weird cartoon.
Did you find out they literally cut up scenes from Robin Hood in space and
Patty, it's a weird cartoon, but Spider-Man under Ditko, it's a weird freaking comic.
Yeah,
like not the Ramita stuff. I mean, then it becomes But when Ditko, especially towards the middle of Ditko's run on that book. That's a weird book, man.
Yeah. I used to like a weird book. You'd see Ditko was doing something, and then Stan would get it and write the dialogue, and you'd say you could see where Stan kind of disagreed with Ditko, and he would write something in that didn't quite correspond to what the drawing was. Like there were a lot of times where there was I remember one where there was like a punch that was thrown, and Spider-Man was hit, and Stan said no, he didn't get hit. He's like, that was close. If that had hit me, that might have been the end, kind of thing. It's like, Stan, there's a little explosion there, like little headlines. And, but yeah, we won't get into the whole, who created who and who did what. But
well, I mean, that's a whole longer conversation.
oh, I know.
And then we start getting into conversations about. Then we start getting in a conversation about Halloween costumes. So
sure. I had the plastic mask with the smock costumes for both Frankenstein and Spider-Man at some point. So,
but do you know the story where the Halloween costume predates the
comic? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So there's that weirdness. Then there's another story that, I mean, he's passed now, but I mean, Alan Bellman told me a story once where he presented Stan with a concept for Spider-Man in the 50s.
Huh.
That was totally different. It was more of a pulp-esque hero with a cow and a gun.
Yeah.
That shoots webs, but, and then he tells me that he remembers it clear. He remembered it clear as day where Stan, was like 53, 54. And he remembers clear as day, Stan going, Spider-Man, nobody would ever buy a comic called Spider-Man. That's infantile.
Yeah. Which is just what he says that the publishers told him. So I don't know. It's just
nobody wanted spiders were icky, and nobody wanted spiders. So I thought, let's call him Spider-Man. That's a rabbit hole, whatever. And again, I love Ditko, and I love Stan, and that's where I am. And
I love Ditko. I love Jack.
Yeah, but
and I love the character. What do you say, Russ?
No, I think that it's easy enough to give co-credit for a lot of people for a lot of things. It's just that never forget people who were involved with it, and don't let one person take all the credit if they didn't really have all the credit. That's my only thing with the whole thing with Stan. Is it just Stan benefited a lot more than a lot of the other guys that helped along. So if you think of the artist as just someone who's like the assistant to the writer, that's not the truth. It's like a lot of those, especially with the way Kirby and those guys work, they were really writing the stories. They were co-plotting, and they never got that co-plotting credit. And
look, I think the proof's in the pudding, right? Like Jack did amazing things with Stan.
Yep.
Jack did amazing things without Stan, but nothing he did without Stan ever hit like what he did with Stan. Ditko did amazing things without Stan. Ditko never hit or was as amazing as he was without Stan. Yeah. Stan doesn't have anything worth a damn without Jack or Ditko's involvement, right? What is Stan? What, you name me one thing Stan is known for, or that Stan did that was great, that didn't have Jack or Steve or Romita, but he had already created, Spider-Man had already been created by Ditko. Yes, Patty.
Stripperella.
Yeah, I was just going to say Stripperella.
Game, set, and match.
Fair.
Stripperella is my inspiration for the. No, I'm just kidding. For my
but I think that you get the Fantastic Four. It's brilliant. But all it is Challengers of the Unknown. But Challengers was not as exciting. It was kind of boring.
Yeah.
Right. But you needed to stand up. The put in the panache.
Right.
And as you said, it was all collaboration, and it's easy. It's easy for people to remember things differently.
And nobody thought they were doing anything other than a paycheck at the time. Nobody ever thought. None of those guys ever thought that it was going to create all this.
Right.
Stan Lee did not design the Green Goblin.
No.
And the Green Goblin makes Spider-Man.
Yeah. Well, again, it's all a collaboration, and because of it, and sometimes because of the deadlines, that's what makes it the pressure to build the stuff and build it fast. It's a product. You got to keep the machine churning, and you'd like to say, well, I will just take a year to design this one character, and it'll be the best character ever. But you probably won't get it done. But if they say you have a weekend to do this character, you're like, oh crap, I better just put everything together as fast as possible. I mean, my favorite thing on doing The Boys is always coming up with the new soups. Most of the time, I know they're going to be dead in 2 pages, if that. But I go ahead and create them as if I'm making a character that's going to exist forever. That's going to be the next Spider-Man or whatever. It's just like I have backstories in my head about why they're dressed this way or what their powers were. We'll never see their powers because Butcher's going to tear the guy's head off. Like in the second panel, you see him. But to make it feel realistic, I have to come up with like a backstory for this character and have a reason for it. But it's so much fun to come up with them. Are any of them like? Do I think any of them could have been like an actual full comic of these characters? No, probably not. But it was so much fun along the way. It's just like to have that creative influence on something, you know. So,
all right. So if somebody wants to find you online, how do they find you?
I'm actually on all platforms. So I just joined Twitter a couple of months ago, and let's see. So Facebook is my favorite one because that's more personal. My friends and comic fans are there at the same time. That's Russ Braun. 589. I don't know what that number is. They just gave me that number. It's the same on Instagram, Russ Braun 589, and Twitter I think is something similar. I think it's just Russ Braun 2 for Twitter. So, then I've got my website is russ-braun.com, and I haven't really updated much because I'm not thrilled about going out to the post office during the COVID times. So, but eventually, once I'm done with Dear Becky, I'm going to put a lot of new stuff up on there for sale. Stuff that I would normally be handing out or selling at conventions, and I'll put it up on the website. So, and I really do miss the conventions. That was like the fun thing about like the meet and greet and seeing people, year after year, becoming friends with people just that are just fans or just co-conspirators, co-creators, and so this will be like my little convention at the end of the year. I'll put up my. Hopefully have a sketchbook together.
Yeah, there's Frankenberry.
Oh yeah, and you see the Boo Berry, Yummy Mummy is she's just yummy, but Monica Bellucci basically. The Count is like a worn out old vampire who's trying to get back his immortality, and through various experiments. Fruit Brute is a forced vegan werewolf by the Count, and he only unleashes him at certain points that he can actually feast on blood. So, but yeah, it's just fun stuff. I mean, especially when you're doing comics and you start as an artist, you just draw something and then you come up with a story after you draw it. Sometimes it just kind of happens that way, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. So I've always worked that way. You do a drawing and then you do, well, what would happen next? What would be the next drawing in this sequence? And the next thing you know, you've got something. Another big influence was the stop motion stuff from the Christmas cartoons.
Oh yeah, I saw you got Cornelius, and I was like,
Animagic, yeah,
yeah, Rankin Bass, all the way.
So,
well, we say hit or miss. I tell you this, and not just because we're buddies. I think you've had really a good string of hits. I think you absolutely have, and you've busted your ass to get there. So, and I've always admired your work ethic extremely.
Oh, I appreciate it.
So, and it shows. It shows in your work.
It's a living. So
yeah. So saying the Flintstones, it's a living.
Yeah, but no, you do it because you love it, and hopefully it sticks, and hopefully you keep going. It's you never know if your last job was your last job. You just got to keep putting stuff out there that people appreciate, and you'll never do it if you kind of like a lot of guys. They get to a point where, well, I can cruise on my name now, but then the name dies because the effort goes away. You pick up a comic that is like, I love this guy, and I'm going to read his stuff, and it's like when someone's phoning it in, you can tell. So I try never to do that. If you catch me at it, call me out on it. So, but because this stuff we get to work on. There's so many people that want to do what we do, and the least you can do is respect them by putting in the full effort on it. So, and that's not calling out anybody specifically. I'm just saying in general.
Yeah.
But that's what I think.
All right. So everybody, where to find Russ online.
Yep.
Russ, thank you. This has been a joy.
Yeah, it's fun.
And.
Sorry for babbling a bit.
No, bro. This is what we do, man.
Anytime we could talk about Rankin Bass, animation and Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man and Frankenberry, we're all there. So hang out backstage. I'll show you the Nicholas Hammond poster in a minute. And
That's great. Yeah.
Patty, you got anything?
Oh, what don't we have coming up? My goodness! Over at GalaxyCon Live this coming weekend, we have some double ups. We have 2 days of Doctor Who cast members, including 2 doctors and several companions and villains from Modern Who and Classic Who. We have 2 days of Legends of Tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday. We have a Babylon 5 reunion, including Walter Koenig himself, a reunion of the Goofy movie. We had the $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman, Lindsay Wagner, coming up. So, yeah, this coming Saturday and Sunday, we have something literally for all ages.
And we're announcing a massive amount of things this week. So keep your eye on the website. Just contracts are coming in. And next week, we will be talking. We're going to have 2 guests. I can tell you one right now. We're going to have George's Gentium. And I'm working on another guest. We're going to talk about Planet of the Apes next week. And I'll tell you why after the thing. All right, Russ. I guess everybody go out and get Dear Becky.
Yeah, it's still. I think the next one comes out next week.
And hang around a minute, and we'll see you backstage.
All right, see you guys.
Thanks tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next week.